All right, guys. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to watch all three of the matches on replay because OBS crashed on me and I was just recording them all together and planning on editing in between. Normally, I record each match individually, and I probably should have done that because then at least some of the matches would have gotten recorded. But the good news is Magic Online records them, so we're not going to be able to see the games live. We're only going to see them on replay. But I did just play all three of them, so they're fairly fresh in my mind. First match of an Aether Revolt draft. This is a pretty great hand. If we draw an island, we can power out Windkin Raiders incredibly quickly because we have 4 artifacts in our opening hand and they're all cheap. So we lead with the Automaton because it can get in there for some damage for us early. And then here we just swing for 1 with the Automaton so that we can play out 2 more artifacts, because that means we can play potentially play Windkin Raiders on the next turn, which is kind of nuts. We have to draw an island to do it, but we could play a turn 3 Windkin Raiders, and that's kind of the goal here. Our opponent uses Cruel Finality, kills our Augmenting Automaton. Seems like overkill, but it actually was a pretty good play. Don't know whether our opponent suspected improvise, but we're going to play Implement of Malice, and we go after our opponent's hand, making him discard something. Peem Outrider in this case. And we end our turn. We do have Untethered Express and Oval Chase Daredevil, which is pretty good. We decide to play our Windkin Raiders. They get to equip the Inventor's Goggles for free because they're Artificers, and they are 5/5s. So they can block if they have to right now, and they're also present a pretty quick clock in the air for my opponent. Opponent plays Animation Module, which is a little scary. We've already seen Peem Outrider number 2 in the graveyard, so the module is going to be pretty good for our opponent. We attack for 5 in the air. And then I think I play Oval Chase Daredevil, yeah. Oh no, I play Untethered Express. That makes sense. I just want to try to kill my opponent here, and with Animation Module in play, my Oval Chase couldn't have blocked the Peem Outrider anyway. Because my opponent can just make 5/5s. The big thing to have here are Flyers and Tramplers anyway, because of all of the value my opponent's getting. They make Peem Outrider even bigger. I don't block, because I can't, but I play Aether Swooper. Don't want to move the goggles. But my opponent doesn't have much in the way of blocking right now, so we crew Untethered Express with our new Aether Swooper, and we swing for 10 damage, which our opponent can't really do anything about. The Servo can only stop 1 damage from the Untethered Express, can't block Windkin Raiders at all. So we get in for 10. And we also play Watchful Automaton, which I was thinking about holding on to for Daredevil, but at this point, we just want to try to kill our opponent. And we have a good chance of getting there. So our opponent attacks here with everything, and I just take it. Actually, well, I block a Servo, which makes sense. But I just take the damage for the most part because it's going to be very difficult for my opponent to do 13 to me here, and I have lethal just with each of my creatures, Untethered Express and Windkin Raiders. And yeah, the opponent just scoops there. So we managed to win the first game. Our opponent did mulligan to 5, and we had a really good start with a quick Windkin Raiders. But now let's see if we can do the same in the second game. All right, well, the second game does not start nearly as well for us. We have a hand with a bunch of blue cards and no blue mana. We do have an Augmenting Automaton and a Universal Solvent, but I send it back. And the hand we end up with is all right. We have a land on top. We have an early interaction in Die Young that can kill something. And then we have a 3-drop. So not to mention Oval Chase and Glimmer of Genius. It's not a great hand, but it's a fine hand. Certainly not as good as our hand was in the last game. So opponent plays Verdant Automaton, which we saw a little bit of a hint of how much +1/+1 counter stuff our opponent has in the first game with the module. And that's definitely something to be concerned about, because the black-green deck, if your opponent gets everything for it, all the good synergies, can be devastating. Opponent plays Defiant Scepter, further making me think +1/+1 counters are everywhere in our opponent's deck, because that card's not ultra playable if you don't have them. So we're going to attack with a Swooper. We're going to make a Servo. Drops our opponent down to 19. Then I play die young on the automaton because I don't really want to deal with it. Thought about playing my own watchful automaton, but I knew this could get out of range quickly of me being able to kill it, so I decided to go after it. So the opponent attacks with his salvager. We take it, go down to 17. Pima Outrider. Not great news. Big scary creature. We attack with our swooper. And then here I have to decide if I want to play Oval Chase Daredevil or leave man up for Glimmer of Genius. And I decided to play the Daredevil because I can use it to trade with the Outrider and then just get it back by playing one of the mini artifacts I have. So the opponent attacks with both. I block Pima Outrider. I know a trick is likely, but because I can get my guy back, it's not the end of the world. But Lifecrafter's Gift here is backbreaking. My opponent makes his dude, this guy, into a 4/4, and this guy into a 5/5, meaning my Daredevil can't kill it. Maybe I should have double blocked with the Servo too, but kills my guy, does a bunch of damage to me. But I'm not done yet, not completely. I play Glimmer of Genius, trying to find an answer. I have to put Yahenni's Expertise on the bottom because it does nothing against my opponent's board, just kills my own board. So I attack with Swooper, make another Servo. Get my guy back. My Oval Chase with the Servo coming into play. And then I play Augmenting Automaton. Opponent plays Foundry Hornet. I scoop. Blows up my whole board, and I'm pretty much dead. I'm not completely dead. My opponent was only going to hit me for 9, and I was at 10, but we're close enough. Now let's see if we can win the third game. All right, in the third game, we have a pretty nice hand. You know, Marionette Master is incredibly strong. We have an early Aether Swooper and Resourceful Return to get back something like Marionette Master if we want to, which is a pretty gross thing to do. We, of course, draw a 1-drop on turn 2, which is always a little frustrating, but we play out Aether Swooper, get a couple of energy to make a Servo. Opponent plays Winding Constrictor, and that wasn't something we'd seen yet, but we know, based on the +1/+1 counters our opponent played in the second game and the first game, that is going to be a devastating card. So I know that I have to kill that thing somehow. I don't have a way to do it yet, so I can't. Otherwise I would, because I know it's going to be a ridiculous card in my opponent's deck. So we play a land, and we play out Augmenting Automaton and end our turn. Opponent attacks with his Constrictor, making me wish I had like Subtle Strike or something right here so I could try to kill it. We can't, though. The opponent plays Defiant Salvager. We attack again with Aether Swooper and Augmenting Automaton since I can pump it enough to survive. I know I thought about playing Glimmer of Genius here so that I could make another Servo, but I wanted to see if I could just get the Defiant Salvager to trade. Or not even trade, but just die in combat. I didn't, so I just leave my mana up for Glimmer of Genius instead. Opponent attacks with both his guys again. Plays a Thriving Rats, so something that will actually put +1/+1 counters on things. And obviously Thriving Rats, which is kind of a mediocre card, but with Winding Constrictor in play, my opponent can attack, pay 2 energy, and get 2 counters on him. So not a whole lot of fun. We're going to Glimmer of Genius at the end of our opponent's turn and try to find something. We find a Doomed Operative and put a land on the bottom. We also hit Tidy Conclusion, which made me kind of wish I'd kept the land, but it was the right thing to do to not keep it. We attack with just our Aether Swooper. We get ourselves a Servo. And we can at least play either Doomed Operative or Untethered Express, who are both good blockers in this scenario. And we decide to use all of our mana. Usually that's the best thing to do. And it worked out there that we can play a big Untethered Express. But the opponent can still attack with everything. And we know he has that trick that can give +1/+1 counter to one thing and then put them on the others. And right now that means he would put 3 counters on this and 2 on each of them. So I can't block effectively. I decided to just chump and try to draw out the spell at a time when it won't blow me out completely. Here I decide to crew Untethered Express and I attack with it. I feel like I have to keep pressure on my opponent. And I leave mana up for Tidy Conclusion, hoping I can find a way to get my opponent to cast that spell on a creature, and then I can just destroy the creature. I can just cast Tidy Conclusion on it. I know it's a long shot, but that's the only real way I can see myself surviving here. My opponent attacks with everything. I decided to just chump block one thing, trying to draw that spell out again, and obviously it's not an easy thing for me to do. My cat, as you can hear her, is not happy I'm not paying attention to her, so I'm trying to pet her at the same time. But anyway, we play Tidy Conclusion in the end on the Constrictor. We just don't want that card to do as much damage to us as it can. The Lifecrafter's Gift, which will give his whole team a bunch of +1/+1 counters. And we draw land, and so we get to play Marionette Master. In response, our opponent casts Appetite for the Unnatural on our Express. And I have to go with the servos here. I'm at too low of life to make my dude big. And that also means, luckily for me, that I can block and do damage to my opponent. So my opponent attacks with everything. We're still pretty sure he has that trick in his hand. So here, we throw servos in front of these two guys. Take some damage, do some damage to our opponent. What we could have thought about doing there is blocking with Marionette Master and then getting it back with Resourceful Return on the next turn. That probably would have been pretty smart because it would have allowed me to get back my Master and get a bunch more servos and just keep making the game last for a while. Our opponent doesn't have any evasive creatures, so it's probably something I should have considered. I hold on to Resourceful Return because I'm hoping to get back Marionette Master. The problem is I still don't decide to block with Marionette Master here, and I should have. I instead decided to just block like this in a way I can kill this in combat and I can kill this with Death Touch. So I'm killing two of my opponent's creatures. And here is where I made a grave mistake. I forgot that whichever creature he targets with the trick gets 2 counters. So I made a big mistake, and my opponent just kills me. There was a chance I could have stabilized here, especially like blocking with my Marionette Master there would have been the smart thing to do for multiple reasons that I mentioned. So I really sort of threw this game away. I'm not sure if I could win it anyway, as low as my life was and as frightening as my opponent's board was, but I definitely eliminated any chance I had of winning the game by blocking the way it did there at the end. So now let's see how we do in the next match.